Okay, good afternoon. Can everyone hear me? Thank you very much for joining us. You are in the Building Coalitions for Success room, so we appreciate your presence and interest, and I'll just begin. I'm Kevin Fitzgerald. I'm the Director of Public Affairs for the Southern California Golf Association, and today I'm also a representative of the California Alliance for Golf. And then I'm here with Katie Prendergast, the Executive Director of the Arizona Alliance for Golf. And it's really Arizona's show today, as you might have noticed from the description. So here to compare and contrast a couple different models for a state alliance. And I think the ends are the same. What we're pursuing are very similar interests, similar outcomes. That's where we're trying to go, but through very different models. And so we'll just start by talking just a little bit about the California Alliance for Golf, and then I will hand it over to Katie to talk about all the good work that is going on in Arizona. So we'll begin. If I look familiar, you've heard a lot from me in the last few years, and so I apologize for that, but I promise I'll try to keep it short this year, and we'll move on to Arizona relatively quickly. So just to begin, we talk a lot about advocacy for golf, but I think the question becomes, what does that really mean? And I get asked on a regular basis, is that you're some kind of lobbyist and you're working in Sacramento, you're working on pieces of legislation? Not really. I mean, the way we look at advocacy is it is well beyond lobbying issues, policy, regulation, legislation. That's not so much it at all. It's really how we engage in the public sphere and how golf speaks on behalf of golf to those in the community who are in the 90% who do not play. So we become very good advocates internally. We're all in the golf community in this room. We spend a lot of time talking amongst ourselves. It's very difficult to stick your neck out and go and engage with the 90% who don't play golf. And a large percentage of that 90%, at least in California, not necessarily fans of golf either. But at the same time, that engagement gives us an opportunity to tell our story. I also put this point on the slide because I think this is the underpinning for everything that we do. And that is, when we fail to engage in the public sphere beyond our traditional golf audience, we allow golf's narrative to be controlled by individuals and interests who may have little knowledge or sympathy for golf. If we don't show up and tell our story, no one is going to tell it for us. So that is really our objective, is to get out into the world and tell a golf story to those who want to hear it, and maybe those who aren't as interested in hearing our perspective. So we'll start with just a little bit of a background about what the California Alliance for Golf is. Now, how many of you have a state alliance? I know most of you are from, okay, very good. Maybe a provincial alliance. I know we have some friends. Yeah, there you go. Okay, Canadians in the back, thanks.
How many don't have an alliance?
How many don't have an alliance? Okay, very good.
Could you define whether the alliance has to be paid members, or they would just like us to do something but not?
An interesting question. So I think the question, if I heard you correctly, is do you need to be a paid member of the alliance to be part of the alliance? So
I think our problem is that everybody wants an alliance, nobody wants to pay for it.
Everyone wants an alliance, no one wants to pay for it. I second that motion. I agree. Absolutely. It's an investment in the game. There's no doubt about it. So from California's perspective, we have a unique model because for a variety of reasons, the Southern California Golf Association has been essentially the staff for the California Alliance for Golf for some time. At the same time, really to hit on that question in the back, we have a California Alliance for Golf because that logo represents all things golf in California. So we don't want to be siloed to where it's the Southern California Golf Association engaging, it's the Northern California Golf Association or the superintendents or the PGA sections. we collectively take credit for all things golf. When we do go to Sacramento, when we do engage in the public sphere, if it happened in golf in California, we put it under that logo. And that's really what building a coalition is all about. We do not agree on everything. And I think one way to describe it is when we're trying to come up with our legislative priorities, really all the ways by which we advocate for the game, we find that common denominator. What things can we come together on and speak to beyond golf circles? So the California Alliance for Golf is essentially, it's a coalition of all of the golf stakeholders in California that are in the nonprofit sector. So we have some participation from others in the industry, but it's solely driven from the nonprofit sector. So I'll get back to the top composition in just a minute. There we are on the Senate floor for the photo op on Capitol Day. Many of you have probably participated in something similar to that in your own capitals, but that's really the icing on the cake and not the real work. So the composition is the two amateur associations, as you can see, the PGA sections. We have two. We have the California Golf Course Superintendents Association, the club managers, and then we have others that are on that board as well. So these groups all have seats on the board: Latina Golfers Association, San Francisco Public Golf Alliance, California Turfgrass and Landscape Foundation. And something new for us since I've been here in the past, like I say, we were really the drivers of a volunteer staffing arrangement for CAG. We have a public affairs team within the SCGA, and so we collectively work with our partners, but we would end up taking a fair amount of that staff burden because we were positioned to go ahead and do that on behalf of the coalition. Something new as of November 1st, and this was big news for us in California, and hopefully a good transition when you start to hear a little bit more about Arizona, is that we're trying to follow Arizona's lead by having an executive director and staffing for the California Alliance for Golf for the first time. So many of you might recognize that name, Craig Kessler, but he was the public affairs director for Southern California Golf Association. You've probably heard him speak at this conference many times. As of November 1st, he is now the executive director of the California Alliance for Golf, and we have a legislative consultant in Sacramento as well. So the question, I've been asked this question a few times in the last 24 hours. So what does a public affairs team do at SCGA versus what a statewide coalition would take part in, and why is it different? Where is it the same? So I think to explain, when I get asked, what exactly do you do in public affairs? I basically say I work at the intersection of golf and public policy. And there are a lot of intersections of golf and public policy. Decisions are made that impact every business, every park, every special district. And essentially, we try to be present and take part everywhere possible. And it's not the rooms we're in that concern me, it's the ones we don't even know about. Decisions are being made as we speak, I would think, and I'm not there to make sure that golf story is told. So we're moving forward with this new model, and we're very excited about it. Public affairs at the SCGA is part legislation, part regulation, part public relations, but large part community organizing. And that community organizing is really us, we the staff, engaging with our clubs. We're involved with a lot of SAVE campaigns to protect and preserve and support municipal golf systems. And especially when we're looking at our metropolitan areas, our major urban cores, urban, suburban areas, if we lose a golf hole, we are never getting it back. We are fixed. LA, the city of LA has over 4 million people, and we're not going to build any new golf courses. So we have to do everything that we can to make sure that we are helping to secure the future of those facilities. It's very difficult to grow a game without anywhere to grow it. So that's sort of one of my mantras. When we look at a CAG, it is focused specifically on state legislation and regulation. That has been one small piece of what we do at the SCGA and in collaboration with our partners, but we've never specifically had a state alliance with a staff person specifically focused at the state level. And I hope the question that I would get in trying to describe why this is important and why we haven't had it before is that almost everything that impacts golf in California is local. You know, we have, and you'll hear a little bit more about this, there's National Golf Day. I'm thinking DC, but I should mention Ottawa as well. We have these coalitions at various levels, and that means a couple different things. And I think coalitions for golf, and it's hard for me not to, I'm not good at holding a microphone, I like to talk with my hands. So I think of it this way, we are educating our members and we are facilitating engagement when appropriate among our membership rosters. Then I think of it as horizontal coalitions. We work very closely with the alphabet soup of golf leadership organizations. We've been able to build a very strong partnership with the other members of this coalition. We're almost one with the PGA section in our area, same for the GCSAA and the others on that list that you saw earlier. So we almost don't know where one begins and the other ends anymore when it comes to advocating for the game externally. CAG has a lot of different priorities, but when we talk about what the common denominator actually is, it's pretty simple. You know, CAG supports research and in turfgrass research in specific. The USGA has certainly very familiar with UC Riverside and has funded an incredible amount of research there. Again, we take credit for all things golf with this California Alliance for Golf. But when it comes to sort of the simple baseline priorities, we're talking about environmental stewardship and really trying to engage with special districts. We have water providers, we have a Department of Water Resources. All of these things impact golf. It doesn't matter the sector. It's not a municipal issue. It's not a daily fee golf facility issue. It's not a resort. It's not a private equity club issue. Some of these issues like water affordability, availability, water quality, it impacts all of golf. And just to basically get a bit more into the weeds, and I will cede the microphone here shortly, but just as an example, so you'll see this is one of our water summits. There are a variety of logos involved with that. Again, we come together to work collectively for the common good of golf. This is an example. We haven't had a staff, so Southern California Golf Association, our marketing communications team has done a great job of helping us communicate to our members. And then we share infographics just like this one. This was a California Golf Water Facts infographic. We share it among the Alliance organizations. And without a staff, that's how it was inevitably going to work, is we each take part from the angle that we can, we engage where we can, we show up where we can, and then collectively find those areas where we are in alignment and speak with one voice externally. And so with that, and there may be some more questions, but we'll get into why this is unique and why California, even though we've been engaged with and have a number of legislative successes that we can point to and talk about in greater detail, but without getting too into the weeds, we've been trying to learn from our neighbors, Arizona, because we've never had this central position, this executive director that can help guide the day-to-day from CAG. So we're excited about this opportunity to have our own executive director, but then also work closely with our neighbors, because some of the issues that they're working on, particularly in the water space, have an awful lot of overlap with the neighbors just to the west, California. So with that, I will hand it to Katie, and we'll circle back if there are some questions in a little bit.
Thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Katie Prendergast. I'm honored to serve as the Executive Director of the Arizona Alliance for Golf. I am particularly proud of this. I'm a Scottsdale native, and so being able to advocate on behalf of an industry that I view as really foundational to Arizona's identity has been immensely rewarding. I'm also really lucky to share the stage this afternoon with Kevin. When we were getting the Alliance off the ground 4 years ago, we were calling Kevin, we were calling Craig all the time. I mean, these guys have been at the advocacy game for a long time, and I don't think there's anybody better in the business than Kevin and Craig. So, and frankly, you know, my thanks to Bill Walker for facilitating and allowing this session to take place. I find enormous value in being able to share information within states, within the region, nationally, around trends that are happening in the public policy space and beyond. Because what I found is that ideas frequently migrate. What happens in California will no doubt make its way to Arizona, so the better prepared we can be as an industry just gives us a huge advantage. So you've always been so gracious, Kevin. Thank you. I want to just take some time and sort of walk through our experience in Arizona in the event that it's helpful for folks. I can't think of a policy issue more contentious than water in the West. And that was really an incredible unifier for the Arizona golf industry. Back in 2020, the state water regulator was in the process of developing the next set of water allocation limits that govern all regulated water users in Arizona, including golf. And at the time, the Arizona Department of Water Resources was proposing deep cuts to golf's water allocation, would have had disastrous impacts. As you can see from the slide, golf courses are obviously a spectrum of size in Arizona. For those smaller, newer, sort of leaner turf footprint courses, that would have amounted to roughly a 25% reduction in their water use. Shuttered, courses throughout the state. So our regulator was making decisions in a vacuum, really with minimal input from the industry. There's that old adage that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, and golf was on the menu in Arizona back in 2020. And so this crisis that was pending was enormously unifying for the industry. And just by way of a quick snapshot, and this may be familiar to some of you, I don't suspect it's unique to Arizona, but golf in Arizona had been fairly siloed and fragmented in the past. Really great people leading the different associations and nonprofits, but maybe not necessarily coalesced or collaborating in a way that was going to allow the industry to secure favorable regulatory and policy objectives. And I think in this environment that we're all operating in, engaging in the conversation, engaging in the regulatory dialogue is so important. It's no longer okay for industries to sit back and think that issue will get solved by somebody, but I don't really have to speak up, I don't really have to think through what engagement looks like. And so working through that, just changing that mindset was certainly a process. In Arizona, there are other regulated water users that had been at the advocacy game for a long time. They have big political muscles, they flex those muscles regularly, and they have sharp elbows. So for instance, the agricultural lobby in Arizona is very powerful. The tribes wield fairly sizable influence, developers, home builders, cities. All of those entities have been around the table for decades and decades. And so golf was really at a disadvantage and really was a reason to coalesce. And so in Arizona, there's a gentleman by the name of Greg Trias. He is a longtime sort of golf leader in Arizona. I think of him as sort of the godfather of golf. And he's been a developer, a philanthropist, and just very supportive of golf in the state. And I think it took someone of Greg's stature to sort of sound the alarm within the industry and say, if we don't get organized, we are going to face catastrophic impacts here in Arizona. So this is a snapshot, really, of our membership of the coalition that was formed. This is not an exhaustive list, but just meant to provide sort of what that cross-section has looked like. The Arizona Alliance for Golf wouldn't be an entity without AZ Golf, formerly the Arizona Golf Association, full stop. AZ Golf was first at the table to be a member. They leaned in. They engaged in a way that really allowed us to move these different objectives forward. Scott McNevin with Junior Golf has been enormously helpful to the effort. the work that Scott, and I know Frank Calvin's here too, but the work that they do at GiA&x, the stories that we're then able to tell has just been hugely, hugely helpful. We did bring in the Arizona tourism industry sort of to the broader coalition. I think golf is really the heartbeat of Arizona's tourism economy, so bringing in the Arizona Lodging and Tourism Association, Visit Phoenix, Experience Scottsdale, all, that's a constituency, that's an industry that has relationships that we were then able to tap into and say, if you don't have golf, you don't fill hotel rooms. So that was a big part of our coalition as well. We have the Arizona Restaurant Association, certainly a number of nonprofits. Troon, which is headquartered in Scottsdale, Arizona, has been a great supporter of our efforts. Their CEO, Tim Shantz, has really leaned in and has been an enormous proponent of the need to engage. The industry needs to speak with a unified voice if we're going to be able to avoid deep cuts to our water supply. And so when I think about the voices that are represented, having this library that we could then deploy to a regulator, to a legislator, to a mayor, to the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, this provided us that library of voices to be able to tap into and utilize to secure a favorable regulatory outcome. So a couple of the steps that we took when we formed the Alliance, the first was to commission an economic impact study. The previous study was a little bit dusty. It had been done by the University of Arizona about 15 years prior, so it wasn't very up to date. COVID was one of the few permissible activities during the pandemic. We obviously saw a big uptick in golf numbers in Arizona, so we wanted to make sure that our study captured all of those sort of COVID-related impacts. So we worked to develop that study. It's been a very helpful piece of collateral as we've been out to sort of show and tell and quantify the golf industry's impact in the state. We spent about 2 years negotiating with our water regulator, the Arizona Department of Water Resources. Those were some pretty contentious conversations. Kevin, you've been in settings like this with a regulator or with maybe a legislator that doesn't quite see it the way you do. So that was a painful process, a labor of love, and we employed some maybe non-traditional tactics that the industry hadn't used before. The director of that agency at one point had made a comment, I never hear from golf. Golf doesn't show up to the turf subgroup meetings where they sort of talk about the latest iteration of the regulatory plan. So we heard that, and then at the next meeting, we had close to 500 superintendents and sort of other industry folks on the call. Frankly, I think it made the director mad that we turned that many people out. But that's an example of the industry needs to be present, it needs to be speaking, it needs to be communicating the impacts. As the state was sort of wrapping up this regulatory plan, we had close to 100 letters from different organizations, and it really ran the gamut of individual golfer to statewide organization, all pulling different threads of the golf story, but reiterating that if the state's going to cut the industry's water, there are going to be significant impacts. Concurrent to the sort of negotiation with the water regulator, we're having regular conversations with the governor's office, meeting with legislators because they were hearing from courses in their districts, so sort of deploying the full force of the industry. We also, at the same time, worked to develop some messaging to get to the 90% of the populace that doesn't interact with the game. My observation is that there's a lot of sort of talking within the industry, but to be able to communicate that impact and that message externally was going to be really important in sort of moving the needle. So our communications consultant, Mike Petty with Communication Links, has done an amazing job for the Alliance. He and his team put together a campaign that they sort of coined Golf is Good for Everyone. And it sort of pulled different pieces of golf's impact, created videos, and then we ran those videos on a variety of different digital platforms, on sort of non-golf channels, TLC, History Channel, HGTV, to really start to provide a baseline level of awareness and education around golf's impact in Arizona, just so that we can start to make some inroads into getting our message out to the segment of the community that doesn't golf. The outreach with sort of federal, state, and local officials during that time was really important. We hosted one of our U.S. senators for a really great conversation with the Alliance. We've had the chairwomen of the state's water committees in the House and the Senate out to visit, and those have been great dialogues. It's a reminder to me, the woman that chairs the state Senate committee, she's a dairy farmer by trade, but she and her husband are avid golfers, and their kids golf, their grandkids golf, and so she was so happy and delighted to, bring us into some of the conversations, opportunities to get our message out. We've had mayors and council members seek to engage with the Alliance in a way that's been really productive, and so that has all, I think, really helped us in our efforts in Arizona. As we look at the outcome, due to sort of the steps that we took to mitigate the cuts to our water supply, at the end of the day, we were able to secure a fairly minimal reduction in our total water use. Every water user had to take some elements and some reduction, but we were able to really move that to be, from extremely sizable to fairly minimal. At the same time, we worked with the state to establish an $8 million grant fund for older, larger golf courses to provide grants to assist with turf reduction, recognizing that removing turf is the single biggest way for a course to reduce their water consumption. So being able to have that as a tool for golf courses in Arizona to tap into and use, I think was a great win for the Alliance. And then we continue to see, what I would call really positive steps in sort of the repositioning of golf in the public arena and the policy arena. I am always reminded water is such a complex policy issue. It's not one that lends itself to tweets, to sound bites, to headlines. And so being able to have sort of a conversation that does the issue justice is really difficult in this environment. But we're, I think, making some great inroads there. As someone that sort of comes from the advocacy world, I love seeing this particular shift. 6 years ago, the Sierra Club in Arizona orchestrated a press conference on Earth Day. During that press conference, was a legislator who said that he wanted to be part of the generation to end golf in Arizona. That was 6 years ago. Today we have candidates for office, we have people running for re-election at the local and state level, reaching out to say, hey, I want to get in front of the Alliance, I want to be in front of golf leaders in the state, I want to know what their pain points are, I want to have a relationship with them. I don't know that golf is necessarily on the radar as an industry to have a relationship with in that way, in that sort of policy way. So I love how that is trending. And again, I think that's because we're participating in so many of these conversations and we're just a much more visible presence. And I think that's important because because water is not going away. And so as we look to the future and sort of what we're tracking in Arizona, I think that Kevin talked about, what's happening in the rooms that we're not in. And that's the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night. And so that ongoing vigilance around what's happening from a policy perspective is so important. Given the gridlock in DC, given divided government in Arizona, we have a Democratic governor for the first time in 16 years. We have a Republican legislature, so not much is happening at the state level. We are seeing a ton of momentum and energy and focus shift to the municipal level. So cities and towns are sort of engaging in some of the water conversations in a way that they historically haven't. And I'll give a quick example. The city of Scottsdale was contemplating a sustainability plan that looks at several different sort of pillars of sustainability. Of course, one of those is water. And in early drafts of that plan, they were going to ask golf courses to reduce their water use by 50% over the next decade. It's an aspirational document, but nonetheless, it suggests that golf courses have the ability to reduce their water use by 50%, which I think is really dangerous. That shouldn't be part of the public dialogue. It shouldn't be out in the ether. So the Alliance was able to work with some of our council champions. We removed that language. We took the woman on the council who's sort of leading the charge on their sustainability efforts out to a course in North Scottsdale, and she was blown away. She's not a golfer. She's actually exactly who we think of when we think, the non-golfer. She goes to the Phoenix Open, and that's her one like how she thinks about golf, which probably isn't representative of the broader industry. But we had her out for a tour. She asked great questions. We showed her the systems. She saw the weather station. Like, she was just left feeling really proud of golf's place in Scottsdale. And that's exactly the kind of thing that we want to do. From an advocacy standpoint, how can we transform the mindset? How can we shift people so that they recognize golf's inherent value and benefit in their community? I think, it's timely that we're having this conversation the day before the election. No matter what happens tomorrow, water in Arizona and the Southwest is going to continue to be an issue that we're navigating and dealing with. And in this environment, and I'm sure you all can point to examples of this, there is this almost like hyper-emotional overlay over every public policy issue, whether it's education, water, and so frequently we're dealing with people's emotional reactions to our facts and to our data. And so thinking through how we're telling that story, are we deploying the right message to the person that we're seeking to influence? And from an advocacy standpoint, the thing I find fascinating about golf is that no matter where you are on the sort of political spectrum, there's a piece of the story that resonates with you. Whether you're our former governor who was a CEO, he loved economics, our current governor is a social worker by trade. I think about the work that Scott and Aaron McDonough at First Tee in Phoenix are doing. Like, those are incredible stories to think about golf's societal and community impact. So again, we can be really intentional about what message we're using, no matter who we're talking to. One of the things that we'll be doing in 2025, and you guys may have this in California, but we're looking to create a legislative golf caucus. So bringing together a bipartisan group of state legislators, creating opportunities for them to socialize and be collegial. There is so much that divides people right now. I think of golf and sports as one of the few things that unifies people and gives people a chance to sort of create community. So I think it's actually perfectly timed to be able to create more opportunities for our local leaders to build relationships that are centered around golf, and then be able to do some educational programming during the legislative session that, again, pull on different pieces of the golf story. So we're really excited about that. We'll continue to tell the story to the non-golfer with that in mind. Humanizing golf, dispelling this notion that golf is just a hobby for the wealthy elite. There are so many ways that we can tell that, and there are so many misconceptions, particularly among the non-golf community, about how the industry uses water. In Arizona, golf courses use 2% of the state's total water, and they deliver a $6 billion annual economic impact. So really compelling data, but again, if you aren't familiar with the game and you drive by a course that's being watered in July, I think people make really dangerous assumptions about how much they're using, how they're using it. So continuing to sort of educate on the industry's impact and really grow and build out that grassroots network in Arizona. Last, I just wanted to touch on Arizona Golf House. Several states I know already have a golf house concept. In Arizona, we're so excited to welcome Kat Cardinani to AZ Golf as our new executive director. She comes from Mass Golf, where they had a golf house. In Arizona, we're really excited to sort of build this out and have all of the different golf associations, golf nonprofits under one roof working together and really unlocking what I think will be new levels of impact for the industry. So we are really excited about that in Arizona, thrilled about what it means for the future of golf. So with that, Kevin, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much. I do want to make sure that we give everyone an opportunity to ask a few questions, but I will start with a question. So for the California Alliance for Golf, because we haven't had a specific staff person, we have created content that could be shared through our own membership channels. So we sell SCGA membership, and our members contribute to the statewide alliance through their membership. We have never been interested in sending a member of ours to become a separate member of a California Alliance for Golf. So that's been the model. There are different ways to go about it, but so if we create something like I shared earlier, a California Water Facts infographic, we create that it gets shared, and each membership organization has the opportunity to share it with their members or not. How has it worked in Arizona? Have you created content from the Alliance, and then is some of that shared through the membership channels? Does it work the other way around, where content is created and then you share it as sort of the top of the pyramid through the Alliance?
So the way that we have done that in Arizona, we create content that we then send to our members. We would love for them to share it. AC Golf has been great to share it. You guys have been terrific partners. I think that most of our member organizations share that messaging, but we didn't want to take those databases as our own. Certainly, they're not our members. But to the earlier question, like when we're talking to folks, we represent all of golf in Arizona, and we hope that partners are sharing that out. It's possible that there's a better way to do that. Again, as we all learn from each other, but that's been the way that we've sort of navigated Alliance messaging being pushed out to sort of the broader golf community.
I've got one more. You mentioned non-traditional partnerships, and there were a few organizations on that list that were beyond golf, whereas we focused primarily on partnerships within the golf and tangentially related golf organizations. We are members of water coalitions. We work with water districts, water providers, and we are asked to help support some of their priorities, which include conservation efforts and so forth. But how did you go about bringing in some of those non-traditional partnerships, those sort of beyond golf business sector groups, and how did they get interested in supporting the Arizona Alliance?
I think that we're lucky in Arizona in that our tourism leaders are very much aware of the fact that golf is just an integral part of what they do and frankly of what they offer. So they were very willing to be at the table with us to lend their voice to our efforts. They're an important group. They're an influential group in Arizona. So having the tourism industry, the food and beverage industry sort of aligned with us and as part of our efforts was helpful. But I think that there's more opportunities to grow. I think that there are other regulated water users that recognize the inherent benefit of being paired with other industries. We're working with a group that's called Valley Partnership. They represent sort of the development community within Maricopa County, which is our population center in Arizona. The developers recognize, the benefit of having golf in their communities or golf adjacent, to what they're building and what they're developing. Western Maricopa County has enormous growth potential. There's a city by the name of Buckeye, which actually is larger in its planning boundaries than the city of Phoenix. Buckeye's at 9% build out. So there's going to be enormous growth occurring in Arizona. There's also currently incredible demand for golf in Arizona. The private clubs within the state, some have waiting lists that are a decade long, some have a waiting list to be on the waiting list, some have done away with the waiting list because they've become so unwieldy and political. So there's a lot to point to as it relates to demand for golf, but it's an interesting sort of nuance of economic development. The state is bringing new companies, expanding businesses, new just organic growth from the citizen base is occurring in Arizona all the time, but we aren't currently building new golf courses. So it's sort of an interesting policy challenge, but I see that community, the development community, is probably joining our efforts too. They're the right voice for some audiences, they're not probably the right voice for others. I would love to see us sort of increase our partnerships with the environmental community, which can be a challenge depending on who the entity is, but I think that there's a lot of growth that we can do in sort of the non-traditional space, and frankly I think Golf House is going to unlock a lot of opportunities in that space too as we seek to work with different groups that are engaging in similar work on the nonprofit side. So I think we'll be able to continue to build that out in years to come.
Thank you. And it does raise one other question that I have. Sorry, then I will pass it out on to our audience. But we do not talk about the economic impact of golf in California because it's the kiss of death. It's literally our opponent's argument. The land is worth so much that if you want to talk about staff, how many staff members work at a golf course per acre? How much is that land value worth if it was developed for literally anything besides some kind of recreation? It's the worst argument we can make. At the same time, while we stay away from it on state level, there are some small regions where it's very impactful, and I compare it to our Coachella Valley. Many of you would recognize Palm Springs, that area where we have about 120 golf courses in the desert. And the old no golf, no Palm Springs still holds true today. But it's interesting that it's so impactful in Arizona, and it's something we shy away from in California. And I raised the point just because the arguments are not always going to be the same. And even at the state level, golf is local, and every community is different. Every legislative district is different. Our water providers for different golf courses are completely different. Some, it's non-potable, it's potable, it's recycled, it's some kind of well water. There are so many different components that go into making it possible to provide the game of golf, and so it's just interesting. So, are there ways you talked about local as sort of driving Arizona Alliance, whereas it started at the state level? Are there any specifics that really have been consistent at the state level that are perhaps different from a local region? So for us, it's economic impact. There's one small area. Do you have some of those challenges? Arizona is by and large, a couple of metropolitan areas. It's very different from California. But do you ever have that conflict where local groups are not in alignment with what you're trying to do at the state level?
That is a great question. I don't know that we're at that point yet in Arizona, as we are sort of getting organized. I do think you bring up such a great point in that there's no one size fits all. Each state is so different in its political complexion, and so what we're talking about today is really unique to our state's respective circumstances. And so what doesn't play in California might play well in Arizona. We would fall on our face if we tried to do the things that we did in California, just because the construct and the politics are so wildly different. We were very intentional with our economic impact study. At the time we had a governor, as I mentioned, CEO, loved the economics piece. It's still been a great piece of collateral with lawmakers who really want to quantify everything that they do and everything that occurs in Arizona. But we have been really intentional about not contrasting golf's contribution with other water users. That has been something that we're just very deliberate about, because I don't think it's helpful to golf to sort of make moral judgments about how other water users are using their water allocation. The agricultural community in Arizona, and this is just for context, they use anywhere from 72 to 77% of Arizona's water. We use 2%. The ag community generates $25 billion in annual economic impact, big number, but again, when you sort of look at the ROI, but that's not anything that we lead with. We are very specific to golf's impact in Arizona. And so for us, that was helpful. For other states, a study like that might be helpful, but in other states, that's just probably not helpful at all. So I think from a rural versus urban standpoint, I would suspect that our issues will be largely the same. Rural Arizona is managed differently than urban Arizona from a water use standpoint, and those conversations are sort of raging at the legislature, but they don't necessarily touch golf. But it's something that just we're aware of and we'll continue to monitor and stay on top of.
Many thanks. I will fulfill my promise now and send it out to the room. Are there any questions that you might have for Katie? Me as well, but primarily for Katie. Anything that we didn't cover. It's very difficult to get into a lot of the specifics in a short amount of time, but always love to be a resource and help. And we have had a number of interesting conversations with many of you over the last few years in local campaigns and so on and so forth. So any questions from anyone? Experiences that you want to share?
Oh yeah. The question I would have is, I mean, one of the biggest seminal moments in golf was COVID and the regulatory work that the golf owner operators and the industry leaders did as related to how golf was treated during COVID. Are you using that as a case study at times as to how that played out? And obviously, I imagine the arguments are somewhat similar as to economic impact, mental health, community goodness, all those things that went on in that environment that may have created all of this demand and growth in the game from one single regulatory moment in time. So, be interested in your comments on that.
So I love that question. I think I think yes, it should be a case study. I think it will be a case study. I think it's interesting to look across the nation and see how every state handled that differently. I think we're really lucky in Arizona that our governor at the time was a golfer, was a big believer in sort of the broader community benefits of golf and just exactly what you described, the mental health, the socialization piece, huge. The reality probably would have been the same if we had sort of a different political makeup at the time in the governor's office and the legislature. But certainly in Arizona, we saw an uptick in the numbers, the rounds played, the total economic impact. But I'm sure California was pretty different.
Yeah, so for the most part in California, we left it to the counties. So we had 58 different policies all at the same time. So it was very difficult from a compliance perspective. To the golf community's credit, I never got a call suggesting that I'm not going to be compliant or I don't like this. It was, we want to be open, we want to provide golf, we think it's important, just tell us what we need to do, because the course right across the street might be in a different county and, well, they're using golf carts with 2 in a cart and we can't, and explain this to me. But I would say, regardless of what the specifics were, the real benefit was that there was recognition that engaging with that non-golf community, that's critical for the future of golf. Now, it was a strange example, but public affairs, engagement with local officials, I never thought I was going to learn so much about public health, and I'd be fine if I've been there and done that for the rest of my career. But I think there was a sense that our leadership organizations, whether it was the PGA section, specifically the SCGA, and again, the Alphabet Soup, they are working on our behalf. They are representing golf beyond the golf community. And that's really what I took away from it more than anything else. We did create a lot of friends. We worked very closely in terms of building partnerships with the passive and other active recreational interests. And some of those active recreational interests look at golf courses and say, that's our target right there. We're going to repurpose some of those golf courses. So the active recreational community, we don't always see eye to eye, but in that sense, everyone was on the same page that our members recognize that we need to be present everywhere possible, that we can find ways to work with partners beyond golf and find some common ground. And I always talk about trying to avoid, we never want to create an enemy. We always try to build bridges. And probably no better example of that building bridges opportunity than the pandemic, because even the health departments got to know us well and recognize that we were not combative. We just wanted to be compliant. We just wanted to understand.
Do you have time to go into the Arizona Golf Caucus a little more and explain, is that like on the county level or on the state level? And in Maryland, we have a lot of counties that go in different directions, and most of the issues we face are at the county level. And I'm just curious, like how that's put together and more about it.
Yeah, so it's I think going to be a legislative effort. At least initially, we have 90 state legislators in Arizona. So we have identified sort of our bipartisan co-chairs, and we'll sort of create the group as described. We have a lot fewer counties in the West than in the East Coast, so we only have 15 counties in Arizona. That is a bunch that is very friendly to sort of the industry side of life. And I think that that's partly just the type of elected official who runs for local office is very different than the type that runs for the legislature. At least in Arizona, our county folks or city folks are problem solvers by nature. The legislature tends to attract more ideologues, bomb throwers. So from a county standpoint, we have a County Supervisors Association run by a great guy. They get together once a month. I'd love for this caucus to grow and become legislative and local, so that we have the mayor of Phoenix, we have county supervisors, we have council members from rural and urban areas. I think there's a lot of potential to make it inclusive, and it doesn't need to just be the legislature. That's sort of the easiest target because they'll all be together, from January to April of next year, from all around the state. But I think that there's so much potential to grow relationships and networks and communities within local and legislative groups. So I hope that helps. I'm happy to chat off.
Katie, can you talk a little bit about the support that you receive from the rest of those in the Alliance? I see the complexities in California. Do you have additional staff? Do you receive shared services from other members of the Alliance? Can you just talk about that as other states may be wondering, well, boy, how do we gather enough resources to do something like this?
It's a great question, and I think it's evolving. So really the Alliance was formed to be the advocacy arm for the Arizona golf industry. The associations, the nonprofits, there wasn't anybody that was necessarily doing the advocacy piece, but again, it was so important. So advocacy was the primary driver, but also bolstering sort of the PR efforts and the messaging efforts that our members were doing. So it was created, I was really in a consultant role, but just given some of the time needed, the capacity needed, it sort of evolved from there. I think we could, have more folks to do more. It's sort of in that space, but I also think that there are potential collaboration opportunities with our members that are, we can glean from, learn from, sort of tap into capacity and frankly infrastructure. That's the piece, creating a new organization, an umbrella organization over the disparate groups in Arizona. What does that look like long term? How do we have sustainable funding? Because we've had folks, and the list that I had again was a snapshot. We have private clubs and courses that are members and that have contributed, but how do we position ourselves so that we have ongoing sustainable revenue to ensure that we're able to do the advocacy work, so that we're able to do sort of these non-traditional media type initiatives. I don't know if we've solved for all of that quite yet. We're 4 years in, and it was a group that was sort of pulled together, born out of crisis really, but I think that that's evolving. I don't know that we've necessarily found the secret sauce, but this is sort of what we've been able to do, kind of bootstrapping it. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity to grow it and to grow sort of the capacity. So we might have to have a follow-up at some point once we've solved for that.
Can you go over some of the subcommittees that we have under the Alliance? I think those are helpful. I think those are two pieces that speak to that funding aspect.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. So the Alliance has 3 different committees that are part of the organization. We have the Water Committee, which is focused solely on sort of policy and regulatory issues. We have a Communications Committee, a lot of the conversation around, making sure members are helping to drive that messaging, to their members and constituencies. And then we have a Membership Committee, and that's really been the place where we've looked to bring on new members and create sustainable partnerships so that we have year-over-year revenue. So that's how we've structured it in Arizona. Those 3 committees are pretty active, and frankly too, that's been a way for us to expand our capacity because we are very lucky to have a group of very passionate volunteers who have again leaned into this effort. And I think AZ Golf, at the top of the list, and we have a lot of really great influential general managers within the organization too that have been very gracious to tap into their network base and to introduce the Alliance to their friends and to their networks so that we can expand our reach and expand the awareness around what we're looking to do.
I think we're about at the end of our time, but I'm just going to touch very quickly on our last slide here, which is that tomorrow, I don't know what happened. Tomorrow we have an advocacy network, and we're going to have a meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning. If anyone's interested, you're certainly more than welcome to join. we recognize that at National Golf Day, we had a number of AGAs present, and that has increased each year since I've been involved. I would say that the AGAs have not played a key role in the input of creating that national agenda. So the IAGA has an opportunity to sit around the American Golf Industry Coalition Board and provide input. And I think with increasing participation, there's been interest that, are we taking advantage of the opportunity that we have to provide input? We may not completely shift the AGIC priorities, the legislative platform, the way that we engage on National Golf Day, and the other 364 days each year, but we certainly had some interest in trying to provide input as part of that decision-making around the table. So if you're interested, we're going to put a network together. The IAGA is going to have some language in its strategic plan beginning next year, which incorporates advocacy into its overall mission. So it's a great opportunity to be involved, engaged. If you just want to listen, we'd love to have you participate. No promises on how quickly there might be, follow-up meetings and so forth, but I think that any opportunity that you have to help move the needle, and in this case, move our national partners, this American Golf Industry Coalition, to look and feel and sound a little bit more like what we, the AGA community, and also the alliances for those that are interested in participating, see what we can do to provide some input. So if you're interested, come talk to me, and we'll include you on the list, and we'd love to have you. And I think we're way past our time now, so thank you very much.